the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
You know that feeling. The news just keeps coming faster and faster, and then bam, a huge headline just drops, seemingly out of the blue.
Yeah.
Well, today, that headline, for us anyway, is this announcement of a trade deal between the U.S. and China.
And it's interesting, the first report we saw actually came via Red State. So we're diving straight into what we know right now, which is admittedly still pretty early.
Exactly. So think of this as, well, your first look. Your mission, if you will, is to get a quick handle on the initial details, what's going on with this, why it's significant. Basically, your shortcut to understanding why this might be something you'll want to track. And just to be clear, this is all based on that initial report and some official statements.
Yeah.
More details are definitely promised soon.
Right, very soon. And the context of the announcement itself is pretty fascinating. It dropped Sunday afternoon and from Geneva, Switzerland.
Geneva, right. Which suggests that's where the talks were happening.
Presumably, yeah.
And the official confirmation came through a White House press release and also a tweet, both announcing this China trade deal in Geneva.
Which was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it?
It seems like it.
Yeah.
Because, as Red State was reporting, Bob Hoagie's piece mentioned Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had only really been hinting at progress during talks there.
Just hinting. Not like a deal was imminent.
Exactly. So the actual announcement does feel a little sudden, given that, I mean, what could have kicked things into high gear so quickly?
That's the big question, isn't it? That speed, it could suggest, maybe some shared urgency, perhaps wider economic pressures pushing both sides.
Maybe.
Secretary Bessent's first comments, they give us a few clues. He said he was happy about making, quote, substantial progress on these, vital trade issues.
Substantial progress. Okay.
And he also made a point of thanking the Swiss government for hosting, which, implies the location might have helped things along.
Yeah, the setting can sometimes make a difference in these high-stakes things. Did Bessent mention who else was deeply involved?
He did. He mentioned the Chinese vice premier, and 2 vice ministers were, quote, integrally involved.
Okay.
And on the U.S. side, of course, Ambassador Jamieson Greer. Bessent also noted that both he and Ambassador Greer had briefed President Trump the night before.
Friday night, that.
Seems so. And that they'd give a complete briefing on Monday morning.
Okay, so Monday morning is definitely the time to watch for the real details.
Absolutely. That's when we expect the specifics. And Ambassador Greer, the U.S. trade representative, he also weighed in. He called the talks very constructive.
Constructive, okay.
But what really jumped out, I think, was his comment about how quickly they reached a deal. He suggested maybe the differences were not so large as maybe thought.
Huh. That's interesting. That speed, it does make you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
Was it that maybe a lot of the groundwork was already secretly done? Or did something just click in these last couple of days?
Well, Greer did acknowledge that a lot of groundwork had come before these 2 days, so it wasn't totally out of the blue, perhaps.
Right, not completely sudden then.
But he was very clear about the main driver for the talks in the first place. He pointed right at the, quote, massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit the U.S. has with China.
That huge imbalance.
Yeah, exactly. Just to remind everyone, that basically means the U.S. buys way more from China than it sells to them.
Right.
And Greer specifically said that deficit was why President Trump declared a national emergency and put those tariffs in place.
Okay, so that emergency declaration gave the president certain trade powers.
Correct. And Greer expressed confidence that this new deal will help work towards resolving that emergency situation.
So fixing that trade imbalance is really the core goal here, the hope anyway.
Seems to be, yes.
Now, the Red State report also mentioned tariffs, of course.
Always the big question.
Right. They mentioned some talk Saturday, possibly about tariff ranges, something like 80% instead of that much higher 145% figure that was floated before.
Yeah, that's a potentially huge difference. But, and this is important, the report itself stresses that this is just talk heard on Saturday.
Okay, so speculation at this point.
Pure speculation. It really highlights the uncertainty. We have to wait for Monday for the actual details on tariffs.
Got it. Definitely a key thing to listen for in the official announcement.
Absolutely. Tariffs have been, such a major tool and sticking point.
For sure. And just to circle back for context, as Ambassador Greer said, that huge trade deficit was the start for all this. And President Trump had stepped back from personally leading the talks, right? Delegating to Bessent and Greer.
That's right. He handed it over to them to hammer out the details. The initial report didn't really hint at specific sectors involved yet, did it?
No, not that I saw in the red state piece. Just the overall goal of addressing the deficit.
Okay. So pulling back a bit, what this announcement really signals, even without all the details, is a potentially significant shift, in the economic relationship between these two giant economies.
Yeah, it's major news.
And for you listening, keeping tabs on this is, well, pretty important. Even though we don't know the specifics, a deal like this, it could have real economic ripples.
Ripples that could affect different industries, maybe even your own bottom line, depending on what's actually in the deal.
Exactly. It's too early to say how, but the potential is there.
So the key takeaways for right now seem to be this surprise deal announced out of Geneva.
Right.
Key players like Bessent and Greer sounding optimistic.
Expressing satisfaction.
And the stated #1 goal, tackling that massive trade deficit.
And we absolutely have to stress this initial deep dive, it's based purely on these first reports, these initial statements.
Very early days.
Very early. The full picture, the real substance, that comes Monday with the detailed announcements. So this just gives you the groundwork, the context for what's unfolding.
Which leads to, I think, a good question for you to mull over while we wait.
Yeah.
What does a genuinely successful resolution to this kind of trade deficit actually look like?
Good question.
I mean, in real terms, what factors, maybe, the specific goods involved, the fine print in the agreement, what would tell you, okay, this is actually working? Something to think about.
That's a great point. It's worth considering what success metrics might apply here. And you can be sure as soon as we get those details on Monday or whenever more information drops, we'll be back.
Absolutely. We'll take another deep dive to unpack the specifics and figure out the potential implications of whatever is in this deal.